Okay, so I just wanted to say hi and welcome to the Grange. We love to promote our community in any way we can and help with our service here. So we've lent the Grange to this night of caucus and interesting information. If you feel moved to help us keep this building afloat, just put a few dollars in that glass jar on your way out. We'd love to have your donations. And so just so you know, we've been using this building since 1964. Before that, it was an elementary school. How many people went to school here? There are a few still alive. Okay, well, thank you all for coming, and I'll turn this over now to Carol Orton, our MC for the night. Carol.
Thanks so much for coming. Really glad that you've come. This is, my name obviously is Carol Orton. I come from Willits, and tonight I'm your moderator. This 2-hour event is brought to you by the Little Lake Grange. Thank you very much. Public Access Channel 3 TV. Thank you very much. And American Association of University Women's Willits Satellite. That's me and a number of other folks who are wandering around here tonight. The format for tonight is to give each candidate a 2.5-minute, very short, 2.5-minute time to introduce themselves, and at the end, 2 minutes to wrap up. Otherwise, they each will have 2 minutes to respond to questions written on cards and sorted out right here by Sherry at the podium. Our timekeeper is Gerry Gonzalez. She's sitting in the front row. We'll hold up a red card as a 30-second warning. It'll be a yellow and a red requesting that the speaker, whoever that might be, would stop. This event is being recorded by Public Access Channel 3 TV. Will be available on Channel 3 as well as online on Vimeo. There are 5 candidates for 3 seats on the Willits City Council. They are, from your right, Bill Barksdale, Saprina Rodriguez, Gerry Gonzalez, and incumbents Madge Strong and Bruce Burton. Please take 2.5 minutes each to introduce yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Bill Barksdale. I've lived in the Willits area for a little less than 30 years, about 7 or 8 of those years in town. So I have the rural and city experience. I've been a business person in Willits for a little over 25 years. I've served on the County Assessment Appeals Board, hearing tax appeal cases for 3.5 years. I just retired from that board, on which I served as the chairperson for the first 2 years. I work with the Humane Society, the Community Theater, a number of community things. I just want to say a city is a partnership. It's a partnership with the citizens, the city staff, and the city council. So we all work together to make a stronger and better city and create the place that we want. So it takes the participation of everyone. I'm a strong believer in people making their voice heard. So I think that it's really important for citizens to come to those meetings and speak up, and for you to be heard, and for city council members to listen and create a city with a vision. So I think we need to create a vision, a goal where we're going to go. And then I feel like we need to, as a city council, create a plan, a strategic plan. So we know from let's say in a 5-year plan, where are we going to be in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and then that goal, year 5, and then set new goals and start over again. And it's a continuous process of planning and moving towards that goal. Beginning with things like affordable housing, transportation, safety, all those things that make up a decent place to live, a place where we feel happy, where we feel comfortable, where we have employment, where our kids have great schools. And I think that's about it for my opening statement. I'm ready to pass on the floor.
Good evening. My name is Saprina Rodriguez, and I've lived in the Willits community for over 30 years. My husband and I have 7 children, some biological, some adopted, so we're still actively raising young children in the Willits community. I'm also a business owner. My husband and I both own and operate multiple businesses here in Willits. At least one of my businesses in the education field, so I'm very involved in education and what's happening with the youth in our community. I was elected to serve a 4-year term for the Willits Unified School Board. My term was from 2011 to 2015, and one of those years I served as a school board president. The thing I'm probably most proud of is that when I took on the task, I didn't know everything, and a lot of people, you get it to elected position, and there's always that optimism that you have, but it really takes getting in there and working hard and willing to put yourself out there so that you can learn what you need to know to be better as an elected official. And I felt that I made myself very available to the educational community. My goals in serving on the Willits City Council would be to be a good communicator. I know that we have a divided community. I would hope to be able to be that person that could listen. I think whether I agree or disagree with you, I'm always open to listening to different points of view, and then voting with logic and with some heart as well. I have several different visions for the Willits community and what I'd like to see happen. I have some ideas about incorporating our nonprofits. I feel like nonprofits are the heart of the Willits community, a lot of hardworking people. Some ideas on how to bring them together to increase business and revenue. I'm focused on a safe community where I feel like I can have a business that thrives and that my family can be safe and well-educated. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you to the Grange, and thank you to the University Women for bringing this together. My name is Gerry Gonzalez. I'm 52 years old. I was born at Howard Hospital and went to school here. I left for a short time, went to Sonoma State, came back. That's where I met my wife. We raised our kids here. My daughter's currently attending Mendocino College. I guess if elected, I would retire as the police chief and begin work as a council member. And I really want to just continue working with the community and helping out. That's my goal. I believe my biggest strength is that I'm able to work with people from different worlds and bring them together and take a little bit from everybody. And I think that's what I'm bringing to the table. Along with some of the folks in this room, I'm one of the founding members of the Kids Club in town. Youth is important to me. I know that the major role of the city is to take care of things like water, sewer, roads, public safety, and then incorporating that, as like Saprina said, with any other resources out there, whether they be nonprofits, faith-based, or community groups. And again, working with the community is what I hope to do and continue to do if elected. Thank you.
Well, thank you to the Grange and AAUW for organizing this, and thank all of you for showing up, even with this rather gloomy weather we're having, but we're really happy for the rain. But I'm really happy you all turned out. And I think it's a great opportunity to see all of these candidates together. We have a pretty good lineup here. My name is Madge Strong. I've lived in Willits for 13 years and in the county for 23 years. As a retired person, I have time and energy to devote to the job of being a city council person, as I have been doing for the last 4 years. I also have an extensive background and skills that I bring to this job, including over 30 years of experience as a professional land use, environmental, and economic planner. So that's very relevant to what we're doing. And I've also served on the boards of quite a few nonprofit organizations and dealt with a lot of complex budgets and legislation and always people. The details about my qualifications are in the material that I brought here that's on the back if you want more details. Aside from experience, I think the main qualities that are really important to bring to City Council have to do with temperament and policy. And on the question of temperament, I think it's most important to be open-minded and respectful. And I know that we all bring our own personal opinions to the job, and we end up voting our conscience, but along the way, we really want to listen to the viewpoints of all of the community, and I think out of that, we also make better decisions. We get new ideas. There's a lot of talent and intelligence in this community. On the questions of policy, I feel that I'm forward-looking, but there's also balancing your vision, what you would like to see, with practicality, with the budget. Budgets are going to get tighter as we go forward, especially with the bypass. So I think it's really important to continue growing our local economy, supporting our local businesses and all of our entrepreneurs. Many of the specifics about policy are in this document that I've got copies of in the back if you'd like to read more about them. And I'm sure a lot of these will come up in the questions that we get asked today. So I hope you will support me for another 4 years on City Council, and thank you very much.
The tallest guy gets the shortest mic here. I'm fine. Good evening. My name's Bruce Burton, and I'm running for re-election to the City Council. I was first elected in 1992, so I've been through a few of these. I was born and raised in Willits, graduated from Willits High, and I might have misled somebody slightly. I did not go to school here, but I rode the bus that dropped people off here going to school. I missed it just slightly, but from graduating at Willits High, I went on to UC Berkeley, got a degree in forestry, came back to Willits, went to work on a cattle ranch out east of town here for a couple of years, moved back to town in '74, the fall of '74. Started my own business, a little portable sawmill business called Burton's Traveling Band Mill at the time. And I still run that business today under the name of Willits Redwood Company over here on Franklin Street. I raised my family here. I have a son that went through Willits schools, now working in the company with me. I have 2 stepchildren that live here in town with a couple grandchildren. So I think that what I try and bring to the council is some history and perspective, but also I think I try real hard to look for some problems before they turn into major problems, and I think that's where I can give some of my help to the city and have been able to help in that way. Couple examples here in the last couple years have been, I was real concerned during the drought that the state classified us as having junior water rights to the Davis Creek. And I did a little research, and we determined that we had senior water rights. And I think that's going to be real valuable to the city. We also took exception with the FEMA floodplain designations in the city and asked that the city take a more active role in researching that and determining whether those are accurate, and they turned to be inaccurate. And that's what I get satisfaction of doing here for the city, is working on projects like that. I hope to be able to do that in the coming 4 years. Thank you.
So I have received a multitude of questions here. Some of them I'm going to try to combine into one question, but there will be subparts to the question. I just wanted to point that out. So the first question, from your point of view, what are the pressing issues facing Willits today? And in particular, 2 questions that came to me dealt with the problem of homelessness and affordable housing. But the general question is about the pressing issues facing Willits today.
Certainly, housing is an important issue here, and one of the things that we need to develop is affordable housing, obviously. I've been doing some research on it. There are HUD grants that are available for low-income areas, and those HUD grants help create housing by supplementing the money that is given to developers, because developers are the ones who are actually going to be building that housing, not the city government. So we have to find ways to help them and entice them to want to build low-income housing. HUD is preferring that you start with infill housing. So that's taking unused or underused properties within the city and start infill housing. I'm in favor of things like co-housing, senior housing, and not only rental housing, but housing where people can actually purchase their own affordable small units. Some people only want a studio. So starting to create that thing. On the shoulders of housing, you build industry and business. You can't have business until you have affordable housing. You can't attract people here to create business and to work in businesses until they can afford to live here. So housing becomes a major priority. Was there another part to that question that I missed?
Just the general question of what you feel are the pressing issues facing Willits.
Well, obviously cannabis, and that's something that we need to look into. And I'm not opposed to recreational or medicinal cannabis. I think we need to find reasonable ways to integrate it into our town. And I'm not in favor of major AF. I'll just say that right off the bat. I think it's way too sweeping and irresponsible in many ways. But we need to start looking at how we're going to bring that into our community in a responsible way.
3 minutes.
So I'll start by answering the, the first question about housing. And I believe that housing is also a big issue in our community. Businesses like myself, the hospital, Willits Unified are all looking at ways to recruit people to our area, but in doing so, we're struggling with where are these individuals going to live, and this is a problem in our community. I agree with Bill in the idea that we need to consider looking at maybe some ordinances and some options so that people are able to rent out studios and parts of their home and that sort of thing, see what benefits we can offer there. In the research that I've done, it appears that as a collective group, as a city council, that we can encourage funding, but really it comes down to enticing investors to invest in our community. And then you get to the next question: how can we encourage investors to invest in our community? What do we have here to offer them in terms of security, that the homes will be that they'll be filled, that we have a thriving economy. So we have to think about, I believe that the Willits City Council needs to get together and think about what is our vision for Willits, what is our strategic plan. If you have a vision but no strategic plan, you're not going to move forward very well. And so for me, that is probably number one priority in being elected, is to first figure out what is the vision with the new council members, the council, and then what is our strategic plan. We need to get together almost immediately and prioritize and think, how are we going to reach these goals? We can't be just grabbing ideas from the air and be here and there. We have to be very focused and details, so that we can make it happen.
As far as housing, I think that we need to start looking at our general plan amendment and getting that up to date. That's a way that we can go after grants. I think, as some of the folks have said already, as a council, we're not going to be able to go out there and dip into redevelopment, which doesn't exist anymore, to draw money, but we can encourage things like HUD, but also businesses, et cetera, that want to come here, make it easier for them to that extent. That's one of the things that I want to do, is try to make it as business friendly as possible, so that anything on our end. I think, to quote Bruce, I think he said that government never created jobs. I think you said once before. But it sure does sometimes cause folks a lot of consternation trying to get a business off the ground. So anything we can do as a council to encourage that, I would really be all for. Question of biggest problem, I think it's going to be water. I really think that's going to be the key to everything down the road, whether we develop more, how far out we go outside the city, and even to the extent that it affects the cannabis industry. What we allow in or what comes to town will be really dependent on our water. I think Bruce hit the nail on the head with our rights to the water, but at the same time, keeping track of what we have and looking at new ways to keep our water and explore other options.
I like a lot of the answers that have already been brought up. I think co-housing and infill and looking for private-public partnerships that could entice people to develop lower-income housing would be great, and possibly getting some grants by doing that. And the housing element that the city staff is working on right now is one of the keys to doing any of that. So that'll be coming back to City Council within a month or two. So I think those are all. As far as homelessness, I think we really do need to get into some serious grant writing and some partnerships perhaps with other nonprofits, because we should be providing some kind of shelter for homeless people. Right now, as I think Gerry Gonzalez has said frequently, it's whack-a-mole. You know, the people camp out one place and you tell them to move on, and they camp out. And it's just, this isn't working, and people should have some place where they can go and be safe. As far as other pressing issues facing the city, probably I think the biggest challenge for the city council is going to be addressing our budget in a post-bypass situation. The revenue of the city is going to go down. We know that because of gas taxes alone. It's a major part of our revenue. And also, a lot of the businesses are going to be hurt. You know, the restaurants and motels. We're going to be trying to do everything we can to help our economy and to keep our budget as workable as we can and still provide basic services and the quality of life that we want to have in this town. So I don't have a magic bullet, but I think those are going to be where we spend a lot of effort the next 4 years.
I really believe that the biggest challenge that we have in front of us is attracting and retaining qualified professional people to especially address the concerns at the hospital. We have a brand new $65 million hospital, the only community in the North Coast that's been able to put together a hospital of our size and have this quality of a facility. And I spend quite a bit of time talking to the administration out there, and it's a real struggle for them to attract and retain qualified people that we need to make that successful. And luckily we have some really talented docs in our community, but they are getting up there in their careers, and we're looking for, and they are seriously looking for ways to address that. And you know, that's the one we talk about, people coming in and investing in our community. They came in and invested $65 million in the city of Willits, and I feel we have a tremendous resource there and equal obligation to try and bring about policies and here at the city which will allow them to help them be successful. You know, I really look at the housing issue as more of a jobs issue. I think if we have jobs, then the housing. As I've watched Willits in my career here respond to, as I see kind of the renovation of housing or commercial property, it really goes in waves. And you know, I don't think we can actually create that at the city, but as Gerry said, I think we can facilitate it when it comes along, that we don't have an overly burdensome process to allow those improvements to take place.
Next question, and we'll start with Saprina. What direction do you support regarding cultivation, processing, distribution, and sale of marijuana in Willits?
Knew that would be your question. And the reason I knew that would be your question is because it's such a hot topic right now in the state, in Mendocino County, and even more so in the city of Willits. And I'm sure as many of you know that we have a very divided community on the issue. And I think when you really look at the core of why some people might not be in favor of it, it comes down to the fact that we're concerned about the ability to attract qualified individuals to work at jobs in our community. We're concerned about the safety of ourselves and our children in our community, and a lot of people are concerned about water and the environment. I myself am not in favor of Measure AF. I believe that it's not good for our community. I'm not in favor of marijuana grows next door to my home, and I can appreciate the fact that others don't feel the same. I do recognize that there are values to the cannabis industry. I understand the medical side of things and the importance, and I want patients to have access to cannabis. I don't have a personal issue with somebody's recreational use for themselves. For me, it becomes when it interferes with another person's right to enjoy their life, and that's really where I draw the line. Am I in favor of dispensaries inside the city of limits? I am not. In terms of commercial grows inside commercial property, at this time I can say that I'm not in favor. I own a business in a commercially zoned area, and I can tell you that most of the commercial properties are inside residential areas, and for that reason I'm not in favor of any particular property.
There's a lot of what Saprina said that I kind of agree with, but I'll tell you, this has been a growing process for me because I'll tell you, I've never smoked marijuana. I can tell you I don't want it grown next to my house. I don't want to smell it. Sorry, folks, but I don't like the smell of it. And I talk to a lot of people in the community who, while they may be open to and respect somebody's right to access to it, they don't. And a lot of that it's kind of like having a barking dog. You don't want a barking dog next to you, but you may like dogs. So I kind of use that analogy there. However, I got to tell you, I know some folks that have personally benefited from marijuana, and I don't want to go into specifics. So I'm not going to tell you it's this evil thing, but at the same time, I think that the state is giving us a vehicle to legalize, or not legalize, but I guess allow for some aspects of the marijuana business. And to that extent, I'm willing to explore that if I'm elected to the city council as far as on the commercial side for medical marijuana. I'll be honest with you, on the recreational side, that still is yet to pass. And I think speculating on how and when that's going to happen, I think the legislature is dealing with that right now, and we'll deal with it. I'm a person who enforces the law, follows the law, and will use the law to best benefit both patients' access and at the same time the city and its residents so that we can all coexist. Thank you.
Well, I think it's definitely true that this community has a lot of division and a lot of strong feelings about this. My own feelings are, I used marijuana when I was in college, but other than that, I'm not a user or a grower. I have no skin in the game. But I don't think prohibition works. It didn't work with alcohol. I don't think it works with marijuana either. And clearly there are some legitimate medical uses for cannabis, and I think it's really shameful not to have those be legal and available to people who need them. So I think sort of the bus already left the station, and it's time to kind of get get with the program here in Willits, I think there is this opportunity to have reasonable regulations affecting how we allow or don't allow any marijuana in the community. I think that some indoor grow, commercial, with adequate safeguards, siting that doesn't affect other nearby uses, and water use is a very important question for me. I want to make sure if we allow something like this that there's real environmental safeguards on it. I also think the same thing applies to the potential for a testing lab or dispensaries. I think there's no reason that this shouldn't be something we can regulate the same way we deal with alcohol or tobacco. But I think it is very important that we do it carefully and not, not open the floodgates completely wide open, but not prohibit everything in the city. I think it would just be kind of cutting off our nose to spite our face. We already have a marijuana economy. It's just underground, and it makes it much more criminal, much more higher risk, much more profitable, which is part of the problem. So if it becomes legalized, I think some of the problems will go away, and the city can regulate those that we have.
Well, I'm not sure I really need to answer this question. I doubt very many people here wonder what my position on this is. I've tried to be pretty forthright on it. The first obstacle I think you have to overcome as a city council person is your oath of office. And if you can explain to me how you can take your oath of office and still vote for marijuana use, dispensaries, and distribution and growing in this community, then we might have something to talk about. But number one, you take an oath of office that says you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California in that order, and I'm not sure the order is relevant. But it is federally illegal, and we can do nothing to change that. You need Jared Huffman and Mike Thompson and Paul Ryan and those guys to talk to about legalizing marijuana, not the Willits City Council. In fact, I believe if we do allow it, we are jeopardizing the landlords of those properties that would be then leasing to them, because you see it, it's in the newspaper every day. This is a money game, and the money game from law enforcement is through asset seizure and forfeiture. And this is trying to put a round peg in a square hole right now, and we've got the cart before the horse. I also go back to the deal of trying to attract and retain qualified people, teachers, doctors, and those kinds of people. And we have an opportunity to be a unique community and have a higher aspiration than to be a marijuana community, which we have been given that moniker without seeking it. And if we pass this, it won't even make the local paper, much less a larger audience. And I think we really need to aspire to a higher standard.
I just want to say I'm not in favor of outdoor growing in the city. There's no way to get away from that smell and the issues that come along with it. The issues that come along with it are criminal activity. Prohibition does and always has attracted organized crime. And when you prohibit and don't look for other solutions, you attract organized crime, and I'm against that. 60% of the Mexican drug cartel's income comes from marijuana sales. The last thing that they want is legalization in the United States of America, because that's going to cut off 60% of their income, and I'm all for strangling them. The prohibition that's what makes it profitable. The way I'm looking at it is, I think as it's a weed. It grows anywhere. It always has. We've always been able to grow it anywhere in the United States. I know of many lives that have been ruined because of being prosecuted for small marijuana crime. I'm opposed to that. Trillions, literally in this country, trillions of dollars have been spent enforcing marijuana crime. There are a lot more important things to be spending our law enforcement dollars on than prosecuting marijuana crime and filling our prisons up with people who have had small amounts of marijuana. I'm not for youth having it. I'm for it being controlled like alcohol, for instance. And alcohol, I find, is a much more dangerous drug. I've never heard of anybody going up and beating somebody up who has smoked a joint, but we just saw very recently somebody being killed by a drunk in Laytonville, punching somebody out and murdering them. That kind of thing is what we want to get past.
So I think this is a good segue into the next question. What industries would you suggest we try to attract that are good for employment and for the environment?
I think we have to have a multi-tier when it comes to this, because I think in the past we've stuck to one business. I mean, my dad worked in the woods, and I saw that segment of our economy start to dissipate, and I appreciate Bruce still hanging in there, and there's still jobs there, but it's not like it was when I grew up, where literally as a teenager you could decide what mill you wanted to work at. I think Bruce also hit on it, that the hospital is an industry there, and we do need to keep and attract those sort of jobs out there. And obviously in this area, you either work for the government, you're on the dole in some form or another, or you're a little bit of manufacturing. And I would like to see kind of a cross-section, any sort of manufacturing we can attract here. And I got to tell you, to the extent that it's clean and the water, et cetera, can be made to work, that there's already some of it already happening in the cannabis support business. But again, I don't think it should define us. I think it should be just one of the many multi-levels that we have out there providing business and employment for our community, so people can work in different areas. So.
Okay, I just want to comment about my oath of office. It's to the Constitution. It's not to the FDA's rules. And I think those can be changed and should be changed. So that's one comment. I think I've been working with Willits Economic Localization for 10 or 12 years now, and our mission has been to try to localize our economy. So in terms of attracting businesses and supporting businesses here in the community, it's something I've been near and dear to my heart for a long time. I think sales through the internet is one of the things that we can do. I think Jed Diamond recently wrote a nice article about how he's made that work for him. High tech, I also agree with the medical. We have a real attraction here with our hospital and related medical services, senior housing and assisted living, that kind of thing. Another business that I would love to see us have would be more energy and water conservation. We used to be a real center for energy, for solarization and so forth. I think we could do more on that, continue to that tradition. And as far as water conservation, I'd love to see the existing businesses here create low-flow toilets and then have a program that might be grant-assisted where people could retrofit all of their homes with low-flow toilets, and we could conserve our water resources, promote business, make money, have employment. There are things like that. I think we can be creative, and we have a real creative community to do environmentally oriented businesses here and increase our local self-resilience of our economy.
Well, I think if you want a low-flow toilet, you go to Microfor. My dad started that company, and it was the original low-flow toilet in the United States. So it's right here in town. And that's my point, I guess. I think in my experience, the successful businesses in this town are homegrown businesses. whether it be Little Lake Industries, Remco Hydraulics, Harwood Products, 101 Redwood, the numbers just go on and on. Advanced Manufacturing Developments, which is now AM&D, as well as, you know, the retail stores that are local stores. They're not the chain stores, but they're more the local product of local things. And I think that's, you know, to me, that is the key to that. I don't believe that you know, that government makes those things happen. Again, I think they make a atmosphere which allows those activities to proceed in kind of an expedited manner and with clear rules and a clear planning department which lets people know clearly what they can do and where they can do it. I really think that, again, I've watched try and, you know, I really only know one or two little businesses in town, one not quite so small, that was attracted here because it was an existing business. I think you really have to nurture from within. That's where my business started. You know, that's where my family's business has started. And I think that next level of entrepreneurship is kind of the puzzlement, I think, of why, you know, this is a pretty old group in here. Why is that?
I can see reinvigorating our timber industry. I don't think there's any reason that just because LP and GP and various out-of-state entities came here and wiped out our timber industry, except for Bruce's business pretty much, that we can't look. They're working at it. I think that industry needs to be reinvigorated and that we need to use better practices than were used by those out-of-state East Coast and Texas companies. And from that, I think we can develop, and this ties in with housing, modular home manufacturing. And I don't mean manufactured homes. I mean real modular homes where you design tiny houses, which are becoming very popular, small housing that can be shipped out all over the country, where you manufacture the components, the walls and cabinets and so forth, right here in Willits in our manufacturing, tying that in with our timber industry, and market that heavily and find some entrepreneurs that really want to get into that business. I think that will create a lot of jobs. I think we can attract tourism to this area, and it's something that we're looking at very carefully. One of the things that I haven't heard anybody talk about is our tremendous alternative health care industry that we have here in Willits in practice. There are many people who are interested in alternative health care, and it's very effective, and I think we should be looking at that and developing it and helping our local people who need help with using our alternative health care. We've got theater and music. I think we should attract the energy fair back here to Willits again. That was a huge success, and I think we ought to get it back into Willits. And as for a theme, I think our theme is, this is a wonderful small town. I think we can get together as a community and start making it attractive and bring that and make that our theme. Great place to live.
All right. Times are really changing. Technology is changing very rapidly, and I feel like Willits needs to embrace the changes in technology and innovation. I believe that our community has lots of great ideas, and we need to be a community that can nurture those ideas. We saw the Kinetic Carnival, we saw Wowzer trying to get our young people inspired with different ways to get involved in our community and interventions. And I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see our community support that. I believe that we live in a very recreational, rich community where we have the Redwoods here. We have some great places for our youth to go and play. And I think sometimes that's undervalued in what we have here. Sometimes we think, you know, for example, we have this great sports complex here in Willits, and you think of it as just a place where the local youth can play, but sometimes it's underestimated how much utilizing that and supporting those people who run those programs, the jobs that it can bring to our area. For example, anytime a nonprofit holds an event here, whether it be a sporting event or something for music or theater, it draws people to our community. It gets them interested. They might decide to live here. They may decide to open up a business of their own here. They use our restaurants. They stay in our lodging here. And so we need to be thinking of ways to attract people to our community, as well as we have a medical field that could certainly offer additional jobs to our community.
So there were a couple of questions related to the issue of water in our community. Specifically, the issue of having an adequate water supply to meet our current demand, the infrastructure of our water system, the storage, transmission of water, increased demand, potentially, the unpredictability of water demand, and an emergency plan for available water. So can you speak to any of these water issues?
Yes, water is a very big issue, and obviously with global climate change, it's becoming more unpredictable. We've just had some fabulous rain, but we've been in a 4-year drought, obviously. So I think we're blessed with these 2 reservoirs and having a really good quality of water, and our city staff have struggled with some of the issues there, but I think they're doing a great job. So we're really lucky to have this kind of natural water source. We now have an emergency water system in place because of the drought. We authorized that. I am a little concerned about turning that emergency water supply, which is well water from the valley, into a regular part of our water supply. I think it's a little tempting to start mining the underground water. And there are people that depend on that water, people who are, dependent on well water, and it is not as easily replenished as the reservoirs are. So in most years, that annual rainfall replenishes our reservoirs. I also especially don't like to develop a new water source until we've really conserved the water that we have. I think we have not done as much as we could. People really tightened their belt under the drought conditions, but there's a lot of potential for ongoing, more systemic water conservation, and one of them was the one we talked about with low-flow toilets and so forth. And large users of water are the most important, but all those residential uses add up to a lot of water as well. So I think conserving the water, managing the water that we do have, and being very cautious about opening up too much use of well water is where I would like to see us head in the future on water.
Well, I think this is an issue that the city has been really proactive in the last several years, and I'm really proud of what the city's done. First, when we did have that drought emergency, and a couple of years ago, 13 or something like that, we were the first community in the state to step forward with a plan to address that problem. We had a lot of high-ranking political people showed up here to pat us on the back and offered us lots of future support. We did not actually end up getting that, but we did spend over $1 million of your money putting in an emergency water supply in the valley. And that's through artesian wells that were water coming up out of the ground on city-owned property. So I really do think it's important that we revamp that permit to be a full-time permit. At the same time, when we retired the debt on the purchase of the water plant, the watershed property, we took on a new $5 million loan and added a third filtering system to the water plant that we have now, which allows us to better utilize the water that we have there. We don't use so much water in making water. We were able to save more water and put it in the pipes. We've done a number of line replacement projects. So I'm really proud of what we've done. And, you know, I think certainly conservation plays a role in it, but we do have an adequate supply of water. We have water supply for growth to handle the infill that we all want to see in the community and handle some of the new industrial businesses that are here. And I applaud the staff of the city and the council for having taken those proactive approaches.
Conservation has got to be part of any water plan during a drought time. And so I think that we have to focus on that and look at what those opportunities are. Things such as drought-tolerant landscaping, Mediterranean type of landscaping. We're looking right now at the sphere of influence of the city of Willits. And the sphere of influence means that we're going to be expanding that what our city can be. And that includes then how are we going to supply that sphere of influence with water. So we have to be looking at how we're going to be doing that. And we're going to have to make that part of a strategic plan so that we analyze and we understand what expanding is going to mean. We already supply water to areas that are not within the city limits. We have to look at how the state and agencies are going to help us with that, and the county. We have to analyze our aging water system and plug up the leaks and figure out how we're going to pay for and identify where that aging water system needs repairs and get that done. And it's going to have to become part of the budget. And a budget in a small town like this, or any town, is always an issue now. So we have to be carefully looking at the budget and analyzing it and seeing where we save and where we move on. Water usage is a big part of that. Thank you.
I believe the Willits City Council has a responsibility to make sure that the community is educated on ways that they can conserve. We need to set an example within our city structures themselves, making sure that we're using water the best that we possibly can and informing others how to conserve. I'm concerned over, recently I heard some talk last week about the indoor grows and the types of chemicals that would be used, and I'm concerned about how that will affect our city water system. So that's something that I'm looking for more information on. I won't pretend to know everything there is about water. Still learning. Once I am elected to the city council, I'll look deeper into, you know, how we can better manage our water. But certainly conservation is a first step.
Well, kind of to tag on with what Bruce has said, I got to tell you, I'm very proud of our water department in town. I can't remember the magazine they were mentioned in recently, but one of the water journals held us up as an example. And I think it's going to probably be in the paper pretty soon that what our folks did. But so I'm proud of what we've done, and it continues to be something the city looks at. And while conservation, I guess being the last guy, you can kind of glean from everybody here, but realistically, conservation's got to be part of it. But I got to tell you that having the wells online is important. When it starts getting to the point to where your reservoir is running low and you don't have an alternative source, I got to tell you, there are communities in the Central Valley that are experiencing some real problems because of this. The fact that we have an alternative source that can help us in the case of an emergency, that's incredible. And so having that online and being able to get it developed permanently as opposed to an emergency, I think is important. Again, one of the first things the city has to provide is water, sewer, police, et cetera. But when you turn that tap on, you want to make sure you have water to drink. So I think that's one of our responsibilities if I'm elected on the city council, to make sure you continue to have clean water. And we obviously don't have the issues that Flint, Michigan has here. I can tell you that. So again, I'm proud of our folks at the water department, and I would continue to be on top of things.
So the next question deals with the budget deficit, which we've heard reference made to earlier tonight. which is to say that the city does have a budget deficit. So how do we balance the city's budget deficit with the city's community needs?
Well, you reduce spending. That's the only way I know to balance the budget, or you raise the revenue. And, you know, I've struggled with this one with the council for the last several years. We've passed budgets that have been deficit budgets, and I haven't supported them, but they passed anyway. And so I recognize that, you know, 90% of what the city does is hires people. You know, we buy some asphalt, and we buy some pipe, and we buy uniforms. You know, we buy some things, but mostly what we do is hire people to supply services. And so that gets it gets very difficult when you have a which we have had for the last 2 years is about a $300,000 budget deficit. That amounts to a couple people. And I appreciate that those decisions are difficult to make and hard to make. But, you know, we are given that responsibility of keeping the city in a solvent situation. I really believe that, you know, the alternative is to look for a sales tax increase either for, you know, a defined thing like public safety or non-defined, and that's a whole nother discussion. But I believe that we have an opportunity. You have to generate some public trust in order to pass tax measures, and I don't believe you build public trust by running deficits. I think you build public trust by having a balanced budget, showing that you can operate with what you have, and then ask for more because you're not able to do. Clearly, we don't give Gerry the cops that he needs to have a backup on the street. Then. You know, that's where I think you do it, but I don't think you persuade them by running in deficits.
I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to pretend that I know the answer to this question. Clearly, you can't balance a budget without doing just what Bruce said. You've either got to raise more revenue or you've got to cut expenses. A small town city government is not like the federal government. We cannot print more money. We can't run huge deficits in the trillions of dollars or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. So one thing that I think that we can do is start educating the public about what we can afford versus what the public wants. The reason you have a budget in a city is to supply needs, the needs of the public and the needs and wants of the public. So we have to find out what those needs and wants are and analyze those, and then we have to, the citizenry has to participate in this. As I said at the very beginning, a city is a partnership. And so the city council can't just solve all these problems itself. The public has to participate. All of us, we have to work together and we have to say, this is what we want, this is what we can afford. You can't always buy, as we all know, everything that you want. So we have to start eliminating you have to look at your wish list. What can we do without? And we have to start counseling with everyone and start saying, this is what we all want. This is the first thing that we can do without. So let's look at that and make that the first thing that we start eliminating and and then find ways to raise revenue. I believe that the Willits bypass can be an opportunity. I think we need to look at what the opportunities of the bypass are. And that's going to take everybody participating and saying, this is where I think the opportunities lie. You're not going to just look at the 5 people up there to get the answers. It takes everybody.
No, I really agree with Bill and his analysis of how it is a partnership between the community and the council. The council can't alone make these decisions for the community. It's our job to listen to those who elected us. The first year I served on the Willits Unified School Board, within a couple of months, we had to cut $1 million from the budget. I have to tell you, that was one of the toughest nights in my first year, cutting $1 million when you know that 90% of your expenses are going to personnel, and you know these people individually. So the first decision that we had to make as a board is we had to say, okay, what is our vision? What is our strategic plan? What is it we're trying to accomplish? And then what are we willing to give up? And what is our community willing to give up? So then we decided, okay, we want to keep the cuts as far away from the classroom as possible, for example. But then we had to educate the community. And not everybody's going to get your message, but you're going to do. I would do my best as a city council, as I did with the school board, to educate the community through public forums, through individual meetings, and informing people of, okay, here is the complexity of our budget, and what solutions do you offer, what things do you value most, and then from there, we have to have a balanced budget. You can't go forward with deficit spending. You know, we all know that you can't spend more than you have. We have to find ways to come up with additional revenue. I know that in this community, some people believe that the cannabis is our savior. I believe that we need to look in other areas. Maybe cannabis may be something that may bring in some revenue, but with that, we may be defining ourselves as a community in a way that maybe not all community members are in favor of. But certainly we can explore that, but we need to look at other opportunities for increased revenue.
Okay, I'll tell you, I live in the general fund as the chief of police, and I have, over the years, had to lay people off or not fill positions. And I'll tell you, you have to walk that balance of providing service with what you can or can't do, and you have to look for alternatives. I think, as some of the folks that have spoken already have said, we have to live within our means. I mean, I drive a 12-year-old car, okay? I mean, I try in my personal life to practice that. But at the same time, we have to look at what the needs are out there. I really think when it comes to budget deficits, we obviously have to try and not go there, but again, look at our service delivery model and see what we're going to do. I guess I'm torn with, sometimes the community as a whole comes to us and says, hey, I want a light at the dog park. I've heard this. Well, there's that knee-jerk reaction as a council member, say, well, give them a light. And over the years, I've heard folks come down and say, how come we can't do this? You go, okay, well, let's look at the budget and see where we can find a mechanism for that. And I got to be honest with you, most of the time you open it up, it's kind of like opening up the cupboard and finding out there's no beans in there for dinner. So you got to figure out, how am I going to get my dinner? So maybe it's that partnership out there. You go out there in the community and you say, instead of promising right away as a council member, say, hey, you know what, I doubt that there's money in the budget for this, but how can we make this happen? Whether it's going with a service group or whether it's partnering with somebody else to say, how can we make this happen? There are some generous people out there, but at the same time, in the end, some folks expect the city to be the ones, but if nothing else, even if we're not the ones delivering it, maybe we can facilitate it. Thank you.
I would like to start by really thanking our staff for having done a tremendous amount of work to keep our budget as close to balanced as they have. Adrienne Moore and Susie Holmes have just done fabulous work, and it hasn't been easy. Also, they tend to estimate conservatively every year, and they try to be very realistic and conservative. So in many of the past years, the budget has said we're going to have a deficit, but we actually didn't have one because we weren't able to fill positions as quickly, or we saved money in various ways. So we are actually in a pretty darn good position financially, thanks to a lot of staff work and the city council's oversight of that. I think we do have, our eyes are bigger than our stomach. We'd love to be able to do all sorts of improvements. Some of those end up paying for themselves over the years, like when we improve the water pipe mains that have been a big investment of money to do that, but we're saving water. We're really improving our infrastructure. Improving our streets doesn't pay back in dollars, but it pays back in community quality of life, and eventually I think what we're going to be doing on Main Street is going to attract more visitors, and that can pay for itself to some extent. So there's a lot of trade-offs, looking at, capital expenditures up front, and then where does that get you, 5 and 10 years down the road. But ultimately, I think, at least on the roads, which is one of the very expensive things, we might have to look at whether the community wants to have another few cents on their dollars spent, because the amount of money that we have to spend on road improvements is not adequate, and our roads are suffering, for sure.
So moving to a different topic, how can we best address the pressing mental health issues in our community?
Mental health is a huge issue here. It includes a lot of things. It includes spousal abuse. It includes child abuse. A lot of it has to do with poverty, but there are other issues too. I'm supportive of the mental health facility that is on the ballot right now that the sheriff is championing. I think that part of this, people are saying, well, how are you going to pay for that once the initial 5 years is over? Well, part of it is going to be paid for by the tremendous amount of money that we spend by incarcerating people who don't need to be in prison. They need help. And we can't start helping them until we have a mental health facility. And not just in the town of Willits. I think all of the incorporated areas of Mendocino County have to start thinking very seriously about a mental health facility. I was at a city council meeting in Ukiah recently, and a gentleman came up with a proposal for a homeless and mental health facility there, and he had been to Fort Bragg as well, and they said, you need to go to Ukiah. And then in Ukiah, they said, well, you need to be going to Willits. Well, we're the obvious starting place because we have a facility that we can rehabilitate and start using now. And rather than wasting the money of building from scratch, I think we need to start using that facility, and we have to start opening our hearts with compassion and start helping people who need that help.
I agree. Our community very much needs a mental health facility. As a foster adopt parent, I can tell you firsthand that I've experienced the struggles of trying to find mental health services in Willits and our county. I had a child that I was caring for that had a mental crisis, and in the most vulnerable time in that child's life, when we weren't able to serve that child, the child was then sent to Sacramento. And how helpful is that to have someone who's in a mental health crisis and they're not even within the county where we can support them? And when they came back, there weren't any facilities here that could house this child. And it was very frustrating, and I saw firsthand how strong of an advocate I had to be to make sure that I sought out the services. I didn't find that the services were very well known by many. You really had to search for them, and even when you found a service, it was limited in the scope of what they were able to provide. And we can do so much better in Mendocino County, and we should do better. I'm very much in support of the mental health measure.
Well, I guess I have to put it contextually because I deal with this almost on a daily basis in my line of work. But I'll tell you that as a city council, I think we can help, I guess, facilitate or help with any barriers for obviously making sure a facility, if one is to be built here, whether it be a satellite facility or something like that. But at the same time, I kind of saw it as, in the end, it's a community problem. But at the same time, over the years, I've seen the county kind of push it on to the cities. You want to know what the solution has been over the last couple of years is call the police. All right? I got to tell you, I have a degree in criminal justice and a degree in business management. It's not a psychology degree. But the law empowers me to put a 5150 hold on somebody, and probably not the most qualified individual to be dealing with these individuals. But I kind of saw it where the county pushed that back onto not just us, but City of Ukiah, City of Fort Bragg, the Sheriff's Department of the county. And instead of addressing it, it kind of got kicked to us to deal with. And how many times have I sat at the hospital sitting with an individual because they're very violent, honestly, to protect our nurses up there. And the solution was take them to the hospital and then They sit up there, and sometimes, because there are no facilities, they sit there for a couple of days. It's pretty sad when I come back with another one, and there's somebody still there from before. So again, I don't necessarily see it as a Willits City Council issue per se, but, and then at the same time, if a facility is built, I want to make sure that the city isn't saddled with security concerns of a facility, that somebody from out of the area comes in and says, I'm building it, but they have no security plan, and it's to basically let the city subsidize their security. So I think all those need to be taken into account.
Well, I really like all the comments that have already been made on this subject, and clearly we need to have mental health facilities, and that it should not become a police problem when people have mental health issues. They should have mental health professionals and facilities to deal with, to help them out as needed. Right now, it's falling to become a police matter, which is not appropriate either for the people involved or for the police department. And that's how it affects the city directly. The city is not going to be providing a mental health facility itself, but it could sure help to have one available in our community and in the whole county. So I guess ditto to everything that was already said.
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Gerry said as well. That's not really under our jurisdiction. I mean, we do not have a department of that, nor do we get any funding from the state or any other county to offset if we were to take it on. Certainly, the discussion has come up about would the old Howard Hospital be repurposed as a mental health facility, and there's been some effort by some to try and make that come to pass. I have really, when that has been brought to me, I have really strongly recommended to those that are interested in doing that it be vetted through a public process, through a use permit process, that it should not be taken on solely as a use by right kind of a designation, because I think it deserves to have a hearing in front of the whole community in it, and the neighborhood that's going to be impacted has a right to be heard about that. So I haven't seen that anything further on that. Tom's approach is to build a ground up facility somewhere else, and that's probably a discussion for another group of people besides us. But I am concerned that hospital get reused in a fairly expedient fashion, and I am a bit puzzled by what to do with it. If you gave it to me, or if you were to acquire it yourselves, what would you do with it? And we have that dilemma with several properties in town, and it's easy to say that something needs to happen, but it's a little more difficult to come up with the solutions.
So I had a couple cards here asking about whether or not you would vote yes and support using a cannabis tax for recreation programs and facilities.
I think the obvious answer is yes. If it's something that the community has voted in favor of, and it's something that the council has voted in favor of, then obviously we're going to tax it. But if the community is not in favor of making it available legally, then obviously we won't tax it. Am I in favor of expansion of cannabis in Willits? I think I've made that clear. I will not be voting in favor of Measure AF, but should something pass, then certainly taxing is the way to go. We know that we need to regulate it. I think the question, again, remains, how will we regulate it? What type of regulation will there be? And whose plan is the best fit for Willits?
Wow, she took my answer. But no, I mean, I think like most taxes, it's got to go before the people. I think as a council, we could say we want this to happen, but if the people want to tax their marijuana and put it towards recreation, then let the people speak. But again, I agree with a lot of what Saprina said, so.
Well, I'm still very slightly ambivalent about Measure AF, just because it has a lot of details and issues that I'm not completely resolved about, especially the environmental safeguards that I think are needed if we start allowing a lot more cannabis grows. And there is the measure that the county has put on the ballot that allows a taxation scheme for marijuana grows, and I think that's a very appropriate thing to do, that if we're going to have them, we should definitely tax them. I don't believe it targets the funds raised specifically just for recreation. I think it is just general fund. But I think, recreation is one of the things that would benefit from that. And I am in favor of that, and I'm hoping that if AF does not pass, that the county comes up with a very expeditious and effective way to provide their own regulatory system for marijuana, and and benefit from both the regulatory system and from the taxation, so that we can benefit from what's already happening out there underground.
I kind of look at it as being a kind of an indirect or even a direct bribe. I don't think that that a tax, I generally think that taxes should be best allocated by the elected bodies. I know that there's a number of times that, and I alluded to this earlier, that you go for a tax measure against the voters, and it's a focus tax for public safety or fire departments or something like that, because of the general mistrust, I guess, of elected bodies like city councils or legislators to administer funds where they're best needed. And I resist that. I do also, every 4 years, unfortunately, or probably every 2 years when we have a council election, the idea of a recreational district comes up, and that, I think, is a very good idea. The city ends up paying the lion's share of recreational costs for the county-wide use of our facilities, and I think that's somewhat unfair. And I really, we've never gotten it off the ground. We've had several false starts, but I do favor a vote by the public to whether they would vote themselves into a recreation district to allow for taxes for recreational facilities and maintenance, and I still think that's a good idea.
I think that cannabis is probably very likely not a long-term solution. It's going to be here for a while, perhaps, if it is legalized, and we can tax it. I think that if that happens, then the tax use, that flow of tax dollars is going to be for a limited term. How long, I don't know. So it's one of those kinds of things where you have to use it while you've got it. So I think the question is kind of inferring, well, what are you going to use it for? And I would say it's got to be used for things like mental health things. I would like to see it used for youth programs, especially, oddly enough, educating our youth about how drugs and substance abuse is probably not the best use of their life, not the best direction to go. Youth programs, domestic violence programs. I would like to see, while we can, develop some kind of infrastructure around domestic violence so that we can start dealing with that. A lot of the reason people do substance abuse type of things, and recreational use is perhaps not stemming from this, but there's a lot of self-esteem issues, and I think we have to seriously start looking at self-esteem education as something not to be scoffed at, but something that's really real. I think we have to help people understand how you develop self-esteem and how that direction goes. and just various infrastructures that we can use that tax money for during the time while we have it.
This next question has two parts to it. The first part is a question that was put forth asking, would you be willing to rezone or annex land to encourage affordable housing? And the subset of this question is, will the effectiveness of the council be affected if a council member or members must recuse himself or herself due to a conflict of interest in housing or zoning discussions?
Wow, the issue of rezoning or annexing is a hot topic anywhere you go. I think it's a little hard conceptually to say yes or no. I think it would depend on the property, it would depend on the project. I think that's part of the whole general plan that we have to look at to see how it fits, that little piece fits with the whole big piece. The second part, if one council member had to recuse himself, I don't necessarily see it as a big issue, but if several council members had to recuse themselves, yeah, that would be, anytime you don't have the full council weighing in on something, I think there's a loss there. But one may not be an issue. At times, I've noticed over the years, the councils have had to recuse themselves for one thing or another, and the process continues. It's set up that way. So that's my answer.
I agree with what Gerry just said. I think it really depends on the context of the particular land you're talking about. I think we have a lot of undeveloped land already in city limits, and that my preference is to keep our service boundaries as constrained as they are right now. We're already kind of widespread, so I don't want to hopscotch out into a lot of unincorporated area if we can help it. And I think that we have opportunities already. The housing element is being worked on right now, and I think we will find that there are appropriately sited places for some lower income housing already available to us in the city. And I agree that in general, if one council member has a conflict of interest and recuses him or herself, that's appropriate. They need to do that, and the rest of us go on with decision making. And it is harder when you only have a 4-person vote. You might end up with 2 and 2, and then you're stuck. But we've been very able to do that. If a whole bunch of us all at once had a conflict of interest, I just don't see that happening. And I think it's important that council members are active in the community, and in some cases that means they have financial interests or land use interests that occasionally do conflict. So we're a small town, that's inevitable, and that's what recusing is all about. So it's okay with me.
The issue of annexation, first, I guess I would say that I agree with Madge. We have a lot of, I believe, a substantial amount of undeveloped property within the city limits that is suitable for all kinds of housing. So I'm not looking towards annexation as a means of accommodating any kind of a housing project at this point. But I think the discussion of annexation or the sphere of influence, of redefining our sphere of influence is important. And I've pushed for it, and I've pushed to try and, in terms of our freeway interchanges, and trying to number one, I think we'd like to try and limit growth in those interchanges and keep it in town. But if it is going to come out there, I don't want it to become something that's a tax burden to the city. And so I've really been trying to encourage the city to enter into some tax sharing agreements with the county on that. On the terms of recusing, I've had to do it on different occasions, as most other members of the council have. And there was even one time when 3 members a majority had a conflict of interest, and that was back in the late 80s. And there's a process for it. You draw straws and you go ahead. If you're going to be involved in your community at some point with the way conflict laws are written, If you're within 500 feet of a project, and it could be simple as paving your street, that can be construed as a conflict. So I don't think that, that seems to me, there's a process for working through it, and it seems to work fairly well.
I'll begin with the recusing issue because a city council member does have a fiduciary duty to the citizens of of the area that council member serves. So that fiduciary duty requires that one recuse oneself as one has a conflict of interest. So that needs to be analyzed, and honestly, if one is going to have a secret profit or an obvious profit, one has to recuse oneself and step away from that and let the others make that decision. As far as rezoning, Willits is like many small towns or any city. Willits grew up, a town starts around the infrastructure that goes through that town, and it kind of grows, sometimes concentrically, and sometimes like Willits, a mishmash, a patchwork of zoning here and there. And I think that zoning of the city of Willits needs to be re-looked at so that it's not such a patchwork, so that we can identify the areas, for instance, that have become commercial, that really should be residential again, or that used to be residential, and for some, during some planning process of some past councils, got turned into commercial and business districts. Maybe it should become residential again. But I think we need to, instead of having a mishmash, an industrial area here and a residential here and a commercial here and then another industrial here, I think we have to look at the whole thing again and examine it and see where is it appropriate to be industrial, where is it appropriate for areas to become residential again, so that we start having a more cohesive community. And I think that's going to help us a lot with redesigning and finding these areas where we can create affordable housing and reasonable infrastructure.
So I agree that we have a fiduciary responsibility to recuse ourselves. I have recused myself before or abstained from a vote when I felt that I had any possibility of a conflict of interest. In regards to the original question, it said, would you be willing to rezone or annex? For me, the question is really, would I be willing to listen to a logical argument? Because we always have to be willing to consider ideas, consider changes. Am I willing to rezone or annex? I don't know what property we're speaking of. I haven't heard from the community. So to say yes or no to that question doesn't seem rational to me. But am I willing to listen to a logical argument? Absolutely.
With the disappearance of redevelopment money, do you have ideas or a plan to address the challenges to the economic survival of our local businesses once the bypass opens?
Well, I think to some extent we already addressed this issue in a couple of earlier questions. I think what's going on right now is the planning for the Main Street corridor and the streets and alleyways. That'll be on tomorrow's agenda at the City Council. So if you want to find out more about that, come to that meeting. Those are very vital questions for how are we going to keep our downtown area, in particular the whole Main Street strip all the way through town, and to try to keep those businesses vibrant and healthy. And the businesses themselves are very actively participating in this whole process. The Chamber of Commerce and downtown merchants have really put in a lot of effort. So I think that's the main approach, obvious approach to our survival in the post-bypass era. And things we talked about before, homegrown businesses and using all of the creative endeavors that we have going on here with, Kinetic Carnival and the museum and the recreation opportunities in the hospital. All of those things are synergistic. And I think we have a really incredible community, and it's just as much as the City Council and the community can partner in keeping that going. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think it's the bypass is going to be a pretty big bump in the road for us locally. But I think we're going to make it through, and we will be a nice, ongoing, thriving community here. I hope I answered the question.
I think you did. I think, I think back, we've had this discussion so many times at the city, and one of the things we did a couple years ago, and I don't know if some of you may have come to it, we invited the city of Cloverdale up to Willits. Some of the planning people, some of the engineering people, and mostly downtown business people, as to tell us what they felt the impact of the freeway bypass in that community did to them. And the answer that I heard from them was it was kind of a mixed bag. They were at that time in the middle of a fairly severe recession at the time, and so they said that it was really kind of hard to tell whether the recession was kind of affecting their business or it was the freeway bypass. But they all survived it, and they feel that it was a good thing to happen to their community, and their businesses improved because of it. They did lament some of the vacancies in their downtown buildings and some of the kind of the landlords that did not seem to have a lot of in stake or care whether their buildings were occupied or not, mimicked a lot of the same things that we struggle with. But I think that just in the phrasing of the question, it kind of alludes to more fear than I think it's really necessary. I really am looking forward to, it's going to be a week from tomorrow. Supposedly it's supposed to open. That's the ceremony. And I think getting downtown back and promoting some downtown, close Main Street for 3 hours on a Friday once a month, doing some things to really promote our downtown businesses and make it attractive for people to be there, what we can do at the city.
About 40% of the tax revenue in the town of Willits right now comes from gas tax. And so getting people to pull off at the bypass and start and keep that type of traffic coming through here is important. One thing that is not happening right now is Caltrans is not working with us effectively with signage, and they kind of want to bypass us and disappear us. And that's something that I think we need to seriously and aggressively go after and deal with Caltrans, and not be the little poor me community that lays over and plays dead, but to aggressively go after them and start getting that signage out so that people know that there's something here, so that they know what our attractions are, so that there's a reason for people when they're 10 miles away and 20 miles away and even 30 miles away to know what's here. Gas, food, lodging, tourist attractions, beach access to the coast, hospital, all the great things that we have going here. I think those are things that we have to be looking at. I think another thing that we need to be looking at is tax incentives to attract businesses here. There are communities that find ways to attract new businesses to their community by offering tax incentives. For the first 5 years that you're here, we're going to give you this kind of a tax incentive to start to locate your business here. And the trade-off is we start creating jobs here with those tax incentives, and then they're phased out and we start having real employment here. I think we need an alternative north-south route that we have to put in our longer term, maybe in our 5-year plan, towards the end of the 5-year plan. Don't be afraid. Number one, I'm just going to say, don't be afraid of the bypass. Just take it on. Use it as something that's going to help us move ahead. Let the fear go. It's not going to help anybody to be afraid. Or angry. That's right.
I agree. As a business owner, I think that it's my responsibility to ensure that I survive the bypass. I should be proactive and looking for ways to ensure that I still have my customer base. If I want my community to look better and more enticing, it's my responsibility to spruce up my property. Too often in society, we try to put the blame onto other people. I believe it's the city's responsibility to support us as business owners, but ultimately it is the business owner's responsibility to step up to the plate and provide the services that are needed. We all know, if you study business, that if you provide a product that people need and a service that people appreciate, that the customers will come. If you don't provide a product that's not needed, they won't come. So we need to step up as business owners. We need to step up to the plate and provide those services for the Willits community. The Chamber of Commerce, I feel, has been working hard to help support business owners and giving us opportunities, ways that we can contribute to the overall visual look of Willits. I think that the City Council has been very good at informing the community in what's happening with the post-bypass downtown development, and I really appreciate that. I think just continue to encourage business owners to have a conversation about how we can collectively work together to increase business as a collective group would be helpful.
Again, being last, what they said is good, but I'll tell you that working with the city, with the Chamber of Commerce, and also looking at, I think signs are old school. I mean, fighting Caltrans over signs. We're going to get some signs down the road, and I know they'll fight us. We'll try for that, but in the end, I got to tell you, when I've gone other places, I take out my phone and I go, hey, I'm going near so-and-so place. What's there? So I got to tell you, social media, looking at technology there to get them in here. A lot of the people getting gas, a lot of them are people in our general area here. I think they'll continue to get gas. We're going to lose that guy that's going through, but we already started to lose the Prius folks because they weren't stopping anyway. They might stop to pee break or something like that, but they weren't stopping for gas. Sorry. And so again, social media, working with the chamber, working, and again, with Saprina just said it, working with the existing businesses. Again, to repeat on what Bruce said in the past, the city isn't going to make business, but what we can do is facilitate it and help them to the extent we can. John Sherman goes out with a lot of folks cleaning up the town, and hopefully that catches on and folks kind of spruce it up. And obviously this time of year we attract kind of a bad element that comes through, and I'm hoping with that bypass maybe they'll keep going somewhere else, maybe up and continue on. So, because usually, like most people, I pray for the rain and it comes and it washes things away. So, thank you.
This last question is interesting, I thought. It came from the audience. What will you do that you feel previous city councils should have done?
Well, I guess in a sense, that's probably why I'm running again, is that I've still got some things to do that we probably should have done. One of them that I spoke of was the rec district. I'd like to, reaffirm to take a more active role in pursuing that potential, because that is a substantial, well, not a substantial, but it's a drain on the budget, and we underserve the need. At the end of the day, we're not able to do what everybody would like us to do. And yet, I feel that the city, again, is carrying the load of that. We have 5,000 people in the city. I think generally we would all agree that probably somewhere close to 15,000 people would call Willits home. And it's 12 to 15 in that range. So, they are buying gas in our town, so they're contributing their sales, to that extent that they're participating, but they're certainly not participating in the property tax side of the equation. So I think that's one that, I'll take a hit for or take claim to and try and continue to work on. I think that's an important one. I think that I really feel that one of the other things that I'd really like to do is we have several substantial assets in the community and in the watershed property and the property that's owned by the wastewater plant. I think we need to find a way to make those more productive. I think we need to work on, and I've talked about it a number of times, but we need to work on ways to make those some income generating pieces of the equation, so we're not always going to the ratepayer to look for the solutions to some of our money woes.
I think that we need to be, we need to be creating a visionary strategic plan. And a strategic plan is kind of a term and jargon. A strategic plan is nothing more than just looking at your community, talking and listening to the community, and then figuring out where that community wants to go. So where do you want to go? Let's evaluate where we are. And as I've said before, start creating a plan step by step as to how you get there. And I have not seen former city councils yet, at least not that I've heard, have a real step-by-step strategic plan of where we want to be going. One of the things that I want to be on that plan is youth facilities. I want something for the kids around here to be doing, and this is separate and apart, or maybe in conjunction with the school system. I want something that for the kids to be able to be doing so that they have real interesting things that they can be involved with that are happening all the time, so that there's always something for the kids around here to be doing. I think that's going to be involving a lot of adults too, so that it becomes a partnership once again of activity, of what we want to do. Let the older people help the younger people find a pathway through, a healing pathway through. And part of that just has to do with creating a visionary plan as to where we want to go.
And I think that's where Bill and I have some commonalities in our thoughts, and that's that we both believe that Willits really needs a vision, and it needs more than a vision. We need to share that vision. I'm sure, or I'm assuming, that the City Council has a vision and a strategic plan, but I don't know what it is, and many people I've talked to don't know what it is. So I think it's more about getting the message out of what the vision and what the plan is to more of the masses. I'm also very much interested in exploring the parks and recreation. I think that Willits has a lot to offer. I attended the City Hall meeting for the 95490 parks meeting that we had. We had a few meetings, but it didn't go any further than that, and I'd like to see that really be something that we take on. I know I would be interested in giving my time and energy to invest in exploring that.
Well, I'll tell you, I could look at parks and recs and all that, and I know it comes down to money. I could look at youth, and there's already an avenue for that to be involved, and I'm not dissing you guys by any means. I think those are important things. But I guess if the question is, what am I going to do on the council that other councils haven't done, I think, and I guess it's kind of an extension of what I'm currently doing now, I'd like to work on our emergency plan and making it a little more comprehensive than we've had in the past as a community, because this is one where we can bring in folks from outside the Willits area, right, Brook Trails, et cetera, and work with them on this and kind of mesh it together. And with that, honestly, one of the programs I wanted to get off the ground, I just wasn't able to. Again, it had more to do with time and people, is work on a volunteer program, which I think I would really like to focus on that. There's a lot of energy in town, and I'd like to challenge that, or not challenge, but channel that into some positive work. We've got a lot of things that are going to hit us, the bypass, et cetera, and I'm kind of excited, kind of scared about that, but again, mostly it's a challenge, and let's work on that.
I have to confess that I know that we do have a strategic plan, and we don't revisit it often enough, so I have sort of lost track of it. We tend to get very involved in the nuts and bolts of every meeting. and the nuts and bolts of making the city offer the services that we do. So I think strategic long-term planning is something we can do a better job of and revisit it more often and involve the community more. So I agree with some of those comments. I also really like the idea of more emergency planning. I think we are bound to have emergencies, whether it be fires or droughts or whatever. We need to be prepared. But the other thing that I feel strongly about is that I don't think that we have done as much as we could on environmental issues in our city. I feel kind of embarrassed that we're the only city in the county that is not on board with the plastic bag ordinance, and I think we should be on board with that. And I think there's some other opportunities along those lines. I think we should have a heritage tree ordinance. We've lost several trees recently, and some of those are absolutely justified, and we need to accept that if the tree is rotting and it's a safety hazard. But we should know that. We shouldn't just have private owners of really beautiful old trees just cut them down without proving that they need to. I think we should address styrofoam issues. I think we should also move again to do some more solarization, at least of the city's facilities. I think we have some opportunities there. So environmental issues in the city, I think, are something I feel we could do a lot more, and that's one of the things I want to do in the next 4 years.
So we are at the end of our time, except for 2 minutes that is allotted to each candidate to wrap up what you'd like to say. I suggest we start at the other end of the table.
Well, it's been I've been doing this for a long time, and maybe that's an argument that maybe somebody else should do it. But, excuse me, maybe I asked for that. But, there's rewards in doing this. I enjoy it. I think I know a lot of things that other people at the city do not know about how to make the city work and how to support our staff and how to get things done. I'm feel that's a talent I bring to it, and I still have an interest. I'm totally involved and committed to this community. Been here for my whole life, and got lots and lots of friends that have been here their whole life as well. And there's something that brought everybody here to this community because of what my parents and my people of that generation created in this town. And I'm trying to carry that forward a little bit. If you can just accept that there was some vision in this town, and there was some pretty good vision, and it's not just new ideas that create vision. Old ideas create vision too. And there was something about this that attracted, if you weren't born here, that attracted you here. And I think we need some of that continuity to keep this town somewhat in that same vein in the future.
Well, first of all, I would just like to say I'm really impressed with all 5 of us. I think any of the 3 that get elected will serve well on the community and serve the city well. So I'm really glad that we have that going for us. I also want to encourage you to pick up one of these. I have lots of them back there on the table, and it gives you specifics if you want them on my positions on Main Street, on REMCO, cannabis, economic development, water supply, and environmental issues. So I don't need to go into details, it's right there. So I think that is just about, I really have enjoyed the last 4 years on City Council. It's an interesting and challenging job. It's not onerous. I have a high tolerance for meetings. And I think I work well with others. Even when we disagree, I think we can deal respectfully with each other on the council and with the community. So I hope you will give me another 4 years, and that's probably all I would want. But another 4 years would be okay. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to thank you and ask you for your vote, and hope you give me 4 years to work for you or continue working for you. First of all, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Bruce and Madge for their service. You know, as a police chief coming before a council, it's really important to have some folks out there that give whatever you present deep thought. So just at this moment, I'd just like to give them a hand. All right. So again, I want to help. I think I've shown over the years that I can work well with others. I'm active in the community. On a given day, if there's some place to volunteer, I'm usually there, not because I have to, but because I want to. I am in different places. Like I said, I think Tammy was one of the folks that started the Kids Club with me, and we started out because we wanted something for kids. And the funny part is our kids kind of blew through it by the time we got it off the ground, but we were able to kind of do those sort of things. I work well with other cities and other agencies. I've got that experience that I bring there. I've got the experience of a long-term resident, but at the same time, I've been out there working with other government entities, and I've gone outside and talked to other folks, and I'm really good at research. So again, give me a chance. I won't let you down.
Often people have asked me, why are you running for city council when you're so busy? And I always say the old saying that when you need to get something done, you ask a busy person. I have a lot going on in my life. I have several children. I am active in the community as a business owner and very active in a volunteer capacity. And so you might ask, why would I want to take on another role that requires more of my time? And my answer is very simple. I love Willits. I feel that it's my calling to give back to my community. I feel like I have ideas and energy and enthusiasm. I never worry about where I'm going to find the time. I always find the time. When you're doing something that you love and enjoy, it doesn't feel like time spent. It feels like time invested. And I'm very active with the youth in this community on a daily basis. I interact with hundreds of youth in our community as a volunteer soccer coach, owning a business that's in the education field, have the opportunity and the fortune of helping to mold the hearts and minds of the young people in our community. I'm very grateful for that, and I hope to bring to the council the feeling that when you come before me, that I'll listen to you, that I genuinely care, and I'm willing to put in the time and the research to make a logical vote that's best for our community. Thank you.
Willits is the place that I'm going to be for the rest of my life. And the reason I decided to run for city council is because I want to put what I've got left into it to help it the best way that I'm able to. I've had a long career helping people find agreement, reaching goals. That's my career. And I think that I can add that or offer that to the people of this community. I help people identify their goals, and I'm looking at the goals that I personally have, which include helping the business community here, which I'm part of and am very invested in, and who I interface with on a daily basis. And I am very interested in what happens with the young people in this community. My spouse is a school teacher, and so I've been involved with the schools in that way, kind of in a peripheral way, but I know a lot of school teachers. I know a lot of the issues that happen with the young folks in the community and what they need, and I want to be a part of helping our city any way that I can move towards reaching those goals. I'm very interested in business and marketing And I think that that's something that I can offer. I'm very interested and involved in the arts, and I feel that that is something else that I can offer, because our artists oftentimes are the avatars, the ones that plant the seed and help a community to grow. And I see our town like a garden that is growing. It's in a stage of growth, a changing place right now, and I want to be involved with that changing right now and help it to grow wherever it's going to grow. Thank you.